There's a name you still can't say out loud without your chest tightening. A face that appears in your dreams uninvited. A presence that haunts even your happiest moments, making you wonder if you're somehow broken for carrying a love that has nowhere to go. You've tried to convince yourself it's over, that you've moved on, that what you felt couldn't have been real because it couldn't be sustained. But something in you knows differently. You're someone who feels everything, who absorbs emotions like your body has no walls, no filters, no protection against the intensity of what moves through you. And you didn't just love someone. You loved what people call a twin flame, someone who felt like they were made from the same cosmic material as you. Someone whose presence didn't just attract you but detonated something deep inside that you didn't even know was sleeping. What you experienced wasn't just love. It wasn't even just heartbreak. It was something Carl Jung spent decades studying, something he called a sacred rupture, a psychological breaking open so profound that it cracks you into a version of yourself you were always meant to become, but would never have had the courage to birth without this exact devastation. And here's what will change everything about how you see this impossible love. The person you couldn't have wasn't the tragedy. They were the initiation. Most people move through life loving casually, safely, choosing partners based on compatibility and convenience and whether someone fits into the life they've already built. But you experienced something that burned through all of that surface-level connection like lightning through paper. You met someone who didn't just attract you, they awakened you. Jung would have recognized this immediately as what he called an archetypal collision. When two souls carrying specific psychological materials meet and trigger transformation so total that neither person can return to who they were before. But here's what nobody tells you about being an empath who loves a twin flame. You're not just feeling your own emotions in this connection. Your permeable soul boundaries, that quality Jung identified as the mark of ancient healers and mystics, mean you're simultaneously experiencing their fear, their resistance, their unhealed wounds, their terror of being truly seen. You feel what they won't let themselves feel. You carry what they're too afraid to carry. And when they walk away, you're left holding emotional weight that was never entirely yours to begin with. It was what he called a sacred rupture, a psychological breaking open so profound that it literally cracks you into a version of yourself you were always meant to become, but would never have had the courage to birth without this exact devastation. And here's what will change everything about how you see this impossible love. The person you couldn't have wasn't the tragedy. They were the initiation. Most people move through life loving casually, safely, choosing partners based on compatibility and convenience and whether someone fits into the life they've already built. But you experienced something that burned through all of that surface-level connection like lightning through paper. You met someone who didn't just attract you, they detonated you. Jung would have recognized this immediately as what he called an archetypal collision, when two souls carrying specific psychological materials meet and trigger transformation so total that neither person can return to who they were before. But here's what nobody tells you about being an empath who loves a twin flame. You're not just feeling your own emotions in this connection. Your permeable soul boundaries, that quality Jung identified as the mark of ancient healers and mystics, mean you're simultaneously experiencing their fear, their resistance, their unhealed wounds, their terror of being truly seen. You feel what they won't let themselves feel. You carry what they're too afraid to carry. And when they walk away, you're left holding emotional weight that was never entirely yours to begin with. Think about the moment you met this person. There was a recognition that happened beneath language, beneath thought, beneath anything your rational mind could categorize. Your body knew them before your brain could explain why. Jung called this soul recognition at the empathic level, and he discovered something extraordinary about it. Your nervous system identified someone whose emotional frequency resonated at the exact pitch of your own deepest wounds. This wasn't coincidence. This was your unconscious mind orchestrating a meeting with the one person who could show you, through their reflection, exactly what you still needed to heal about your relationship with love itself. You probably felt them before you consciously understood what you were feeling. The air shifted when they entered a room. You could sense their mood without them speaking. You knew what they were thinking before they formed the words. And in their presence, you felt something you'd been searching for your entire life without knowing you were searching. You felt seen. Not just noticed, but recognized at depths where your essence lives. In chambers of yourself you'd never shown anyone because you didn't know how to access them yourself. But here's where Jung's insight becomes almost unbearably profound. The person you chose, or who chose you, was never randomly unavailable. Empaths, he found through decades of clinical observation, are unconsciously magnetized to twin flames whose unavailability mirrors their own hidden unavailability to themselves. While you're pouring everything into them, loving them with a purity that feels like it could heal anything, you remain mysteriously unavailable to your own needs, your own worthiness, your own right to receive the quality of love you so desperately give. The impossible love becomes a mirror, but not in the way you think. It's showing you how you treat yourself, how you abandon yourself while trying to save someone else, how you make yourself emotionally homeless while trying to build a home in someone who has no room for you. And Jung discovered that until you see this pattern, until you recognize that their unavailability is reflecting your unavailability to yourself, you'll keep recreating this dynamic in different forms with different faces, always wondering why love feels like something you give but never quite receive. If you're recognizing yourself in these words, if you're feeling that uncomfortable stirring that happens when truth touches a place you've been avoiding, I want you to stay with me. Because what Jung discovered about what happens next, about why this breaking open is actually the most sacred thing that's ever happened to you, will transform every moment of pain you've endured into something you'll eventually learn to see as grace. Share in the comments if this is landing. Sometimes just naming what you've been carrying in silence is the first step toward understanding that you're not broken from loving this way. You're breaking open into something far more powerful than who you were before you knew this love existed. Carl Jung made a discovery about empaths and twin flames that will explain why you still feel this person in your body, even though they're gone. Why certain songs drop you to your knees. Why you wake at 3 in the morning with emotions that don't belong to you but somehow you know are theirs. He found that when an empath loves a twin flame, they form what he called energetic cords, psychological structures that exist in the space between your conscious awareness and the collective unconscious. These aren't metaphors. Jung believed these were actual energetic connections that remain active long after the physical relationship ends. Your empathic system doesn't just register emotional information through normal sensory channels. You have what Jung termed permeable psychic boundaries, and when you love someone at twin flame intensity, your energy field literally entangles with theirs. You create invisible threads that allow emotional information to flow between you regardless of physical distance, regardless of whether you're in contact, regardless of how much time has passed since you last spoke. This is why you can feel them thinking about you even when logic says you shouldn't. Why you suddenly get flooded with emotions that aren't yours and somehow you just know, that in that moment they're struggling with something or remembering you or feeling the weight of what you shared. Jung documented case after case of empaths who could describe in precise detail what their twin flame was experiencing, feeling, even dreaming about, despite being separated by continents and years. This isn't psychic ability in the supernatural sense, though Jung didn't dismiss that possibility. This is your nervous system's capacity to maintain resonance with someone whose frequency became entangled with yours at levels most people's psychological defenses prevent entirely. Most people love with walls up, with protective barriers that keep them safe from this kind of penetration. But you loved without armor. You let someone all the way in. And now they live in your cellular memory, in your energy field, in spaces so deep that conventional healing approaches can't reach them. But here's what Jung understood, that modern psychology misses entirely. These cords don't dissolve through avoidance or distraction or trying to force yourself to move on. They transform through conscious acknowledgement and integration. You must learn to honor the cord for what it represents while consciously reclaiming the energy you've been unconsciously sending through it. This isn't about cutting them out of your heart or pretending they didn't matter. This is about retrieving the pieces of yourself that you projected onto them, the parts of your soul you gave away because you didn't know you were supposed to keep them. Jung developed a practice he called cord consciousness, something he rarely shared outside his inner circle. He would guide empaths through visualization where they could actually see the energetic cord connecting them to their twin flame. Not to sever it violently, which only creates psychic wounding, but to transform it, to let it shift from a draining attachment into what he called a golden thread of recognition, a connection that honors what was shared while no longer depleting your life force, a way of loving them eternally in the realm of souls while accepting that your human paths were never meant to merge. Think about what this person reflected back to you about yourself, not what they gave you or didn't give you, but what you saw in yourself when they looked at you. You probably felt more creative in their presence, more authentic, more willing to take risks, more alive than you'd felt in years or maybe ever. Jung would tell you that these qualities weren't gifts they gave you. They were aspects of yourself that you finally gave yourself permission to express because their recognition made it feel safe enough. This is the heart of what Jung called projected completion. When you meet your twin flame as an empath, you're encountering someone who embodies qualities your soul has been trying to develop. Their confidence when you've been hiding, their emotional freedom when you've been performing, their courage to be different when you've been conforming. Your empathic system recognized these qualities instantly, and the attraction you felt wasn't just to them. It was to the version of yourself you could become if you integrated what they were showing you. But most people experiencing this never realize what's actually happening. They think they need the person to feel complete. They believe that if they could just be together, everything would finally make sense. And this is where Jung's teaching becomes revolutionary. The more you chase union with the external person, the further you move from the internal integration their presence was meant to trigger. They appeared in your life not to stay, but to show you what's possible when you become what you've been projecting onto them. Carl Jung identified something about twin flame connections that completely inverts how we understand their purpose. He discovered that these encounters are never designed for conventional partnership. They're designed for what he called forced individuation, a violent acceleration of the psychological process where you're thrust into becoming a whole person whether you feel ready or not. And for empaths, this process is particularly brutal because you've spent your entire life avoiding exactly this kind of self-focus. Think about your childhood for a moment. You probably learned very early to monitor the emotional temperature of your environment for survival. Maybe you had a parent whose moods were unpredictable, and you became hyper-vigilant to sensing the storm before it arrived. Maybe your family's stability depended on you being the one who kept everyone emotionally regulated, who absorbed tension before it could escalate, who sacrificed your own needs to maintain peace. You became an emotional shock absorber, and this training created your empathic superpowers. But it also created a pattern where your value became tied to how well you could sense and serve other people's emotional needs. When you met your twin flame, this ancient pattern reactivated with devastating intensity. Here was someone whose emotional complexity you could feel with microscopic precision. Here was someone whose wounds you could see clearly, whose potential you could recognize completely, whose pain you were certain you could heal if they would just let you close enough. And so you poured yourself in. You became available to their every shift, their every need, their every moment of struggle. You made yourself into exactly what you believed they needed, shape-shifting to accommodate their limitations, excusing their unavailability, calling your self-abandonment unconditional love. But Jung discovered something crucial about this dynamic. The twin flame's unavailability wasn't keeping you from the love you deserved. It was showing you the love you weren't giving yourself. Every moment you spent trying to decode their mixed signals, you were avoiding the clarity of your own needs. Every hour you spent hoping they would change, you were refusing to change your relationship with your own enoughness. Every day you accepted less than you deserved. You were teaching yourself that your needs don't matter as much as your ability to accommodate someone else's inability to meet you. The impossible love was never about them. It was always about the moment you would finally become so uncomfortable with your own self-abandonment that you'd have no choice but to choose yourself. Jung called this the dark night of the empathic soul, and he understood it as a necessary death. The version of you who believed your worth came from how well you could understand and accommodate others had to die so that a version who knows her inherent worth could be born. This death feels unbearable while it's happening. Every identity you built around being the one who understands, who holds space, who loves unconditionally no matter what, it all collapses when the person you poured yourself into walks away as if your love meant nothing. The devastation isn't proportional to the length of the relationship, or even whether it was officially acknowledged. Jung found that empaths could be completely shattered by someone they knew for days because the depth of recognition had nothing to do with time and everything to do with the soul-level knowing that occurred in spaces between words. But here's what Jung wanted empaths to understand more than anything. This breaking open, this complete dissolution of who you were, this isn't happening because you loved wrong or chose wrong or weren't healed enough. This is happening because your soul enrolled you in advanced curriculum for consciousness development. Not everyone needs this particular lesson. Most people will go their entire lives loving conditionally, superficially, safely. But you've been drafted into learning something most humans never master. You're learning to love without losing yourself, to feel deeply without being destroyed by what you feel, to offer presence without abandoning your own needs. The twin flame appeared in your life as the perfect teacher for this lesson. They had to be captivating enough to get you to open completely. They had to reflect enough of your potential to make you believe healing them was possible. And they had to be unavailable enough that eventually, finally, you'd have no choice but to stop trying to fix them and start focusing on healing yourself. The impossibility wasn't the problem. The impossibility was the entire point. If you're feeling something shift inside you right now, if you're recognizing that maybe you've been using this connection to avoid the scariest work of actually choosing yourself, take a breath. Comment below with just the word choosing if this is resonating. Because Jung discovered that the moment you acknowledge what's really happening is often the moment the transformation can finally begin. Carl Jung made a discovery about the actual function of twin flame encounters that will reframe everything you've been telling yourself about why you met. He found that twin flames appear in an empath's life not as romantic partners, but as what he called psychological mirrors reflecting your own unlived potential. Every quality in them that captivated you beyond reason, that drew you like gravity, those weren't random attractions. They were dormant aspects of your own psyche calling out to be developed, integrated, embodied. Think carefully about what specifically drew you to this person. Was it their creative fire that made you remember dreams you'd buried? Their emotional authenticity that showed you how much you'd been performing? Their courage to live outside conventional rules when you'd been playing it safe your entire life? Their way of seeing beauty in darkness when you'd been forcing yourself to stay positive? Jung would ask you to sit with this question because the answer reveals everything about what you're meant to become. You weren't falling in love with them. You were falling in love with your own reflection, with possibilities for who you could be if you gave yourself permission to embody what you were seeing in them. The magnetic pull you felt was your soul recognizing itself in external form, seeing its own completeness projected onto another person so it could finally understand what integration might look like. This explains the specific quality of twin flame recognition. It's not just attraction, it's not just chemistry. It's a feeling of coming home to someone you've never met, of remembering something you never forgot, of recognizing someone your rational mind knows is a stranger, but your soul experiences as intimately familiar. Jung called this anima and animus recognition. The moment when you encounter someone who embodies the contrasexual aspects of your own psyche that you've been unconsciously suppressing. When a woman meets her twin flame, she's often seeing her own masculine energy, her power, her authority, her ability to take action and claim space reflected in another person. When a man meets his twin flame, he's encountering his own feminine aspects, his capacity for feeling, for intuition, for emotional depth he's been taught to deny. And for empaths, this recognition is even more intense because your permeable boundaries mean you don't just observe these qualities. You temporarily merge with them. You feel what it's like to embody what you've been missing. And the experience is so intoxicating that you convince yourself you need this person to feel whole. But here's the paradox Jung understood that most people trapped in twin flame longing never grasp. The more you chase union with the external person, the further you move from internal integration. Every moment you spend focused on getting them back, on understanding why they left, on waiting for them to be ready, you're avoiding the real work their presence came to initiate. You're supposed to become what you loved in them. You're meant to integrate those qualities so fully that you no longer need their reflection to access them. Jung documented what happens when empaths successfully make this shift. They stop trying to heal the other person and start developing the qualities they were projecting. The woman who loved her twin flame's confidence begins building her own. The man who was mesmerized by his twin flame's emotional depth starts accessing his own feelings. The empath who was captivated by their twin flame's authenticity begins living from truth rather than performance. And something remarkable happens in this process. The desperate need for the external person begins to dissolve not because the love diminishes, but because the purpose has been fulfilled. You're learning what Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to generate within yourself what you were seeking from another. This doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen easily. It requires you to sit with the most uncomfortable truth an empath can face. You cannot love someone into wholeness. You cannot feel someone into healing. You cannot understand someone into being ready for you. All the empathic abilities that helped you survive childhood become weapons of self-destruction in adult relationships when you use them to bypass the fundamental truth that love requires two available people who choose each other consistently. The breaking open happens when you finally accept that no amount of empathic understanding will change someone who isn't ready to meet you. When you stop believing that if you just felt more, gave more, understood better, they would magically transform. When you let yourself feel the rage buried beneath all that compassionate understanding, the fury at giving so much to someone who gave so little back, at making yourself small to accommodate their limitations, at calling yourself betrayal spiritual love. Jung knew that empaths had to grieve not just the person, but the fantasy that empathic love has the power to save people who don't want to be saved. This grief is what completes the breaking open. And in that breaking, you finally have the chance to redirect all that empathic attention toward the one person who's been waiting your entire life to receive it, yourself. But Carl Jung issued a crucial warning about twin flame connections that most spiritual teachings completely ignore. He discovered there's a shadow side to these encounters, a trap that can keep you stuck in cycles of beautiful suffering that prevent the very transformation they're designed to catalyze. Jung called this the twin flame trap, and he considered it one of the most sophisticated forms of spiritual bypassing he'd ever documented. Here's the pattern he observed repeatedly in his work. Some empaths become addicted to the intensity of twin flame longing precisely because it feels more profound than actually living. They remain in a state of perpetual waiting, perpetual processing, perpetual hope for eventual reunion, and this waiting becomes a way to avoid the vulnerability required to fully show up in available relationships and in their own lives. The impossible love becomes a beautiful excuse to never risk being seen completely by someone who could actually choose to stay or leave based on who you really are. Think about how much energy you've poured into this connection. The hours spent analyzing every interaction, every message, every moment of silence. The emotional bandwidth devoted to feeling their feelings, trying to understand their wounds, hoping they'll finally heal enough to choose you. The dreams at night where you're together, the fantasies during the day about how it could be if circumstances were different. Now imagine if you directed even half that energy toward building the life you're actually capable of living, toward developing the qualities you saw in them, toward showing up fully for opportunities and connections actually available to you. Jung found that people trapped in the twin flame shadow often dismiss available relationships because nobody matches the intensity of the impossible connection. They intellectualize their growth without embodying it. They talk about healing while using the twin flame narrative as protection against the vulnerability of real intimacy. They remain devoted to someone who isn't present while being unavailable to people who are. And they call this loyalty, spiritual connection, honoring sacred love. But what it actually is, Jung would say, is fear dressed up as devotion. The question he'd ask you, and I need you to be brutally honest with yourself about this, is whether your twin flame connection has expanded your life or become your life. Has it opened you to greater authenticity, or has it become a place to hide from authentic living? Has the separation inspired you to develop the qualities they reflected, or has it given you permission to remain in perpetual preparation? Perpetual someday, perpetual not quite ready yet? Because Jung discovered something that will either liberate you or devastate you depending on how attached you are to the fantasy. The real twin flame journey isn't about eventual union with the other person. It's about union with yourself. Every quality you saw in them you're meant to cultivate independently. Every way they made you feel, you're meant to learn to generate from your own essence. Every glimpse of wholeness you experienced in their presence, you're meant to embody in their absence. This is where most people misunderstand the entire purpose. They think the goal is to do enough inner work to finally be worthy of reunion. They believe if they heal enough, grow enough, transform enough, the universe will reward them by bringing their twin flame back. But Jung found something that inverts this completely. The more you genuinely transform, the less you need the external person. Not because you love them less, but because you found in yourself what you were seeking in them. Some twin flames do eventually come back together. Jung documented this. But when they do, it's after both people completed their necessary individuation work independently. After each person became whole without the other. After the desperate neediness transformed into sovereign choice. And when these reunions happen, they look nothing like what was imagined. They're not about finally getting what you always wanted. They're about two complete people choosing to collaborate in continued evolution, rather than two fragments trying to complete each other. But for most people, Jung found, the twin flame serves a different function entirely. They appear to show you what's possible, to crack you open to depths you didn't know you contained, to reflect qualities you're meant to develop. And then they step back, leaving you with the most important choice you'll ever make. Will you spend your energy chasing the person who served as the mirror, or will you finally look at what the mirror was showing you? If you're feeling called out right now, if you're recognizing that maybe you've been using this connection as a way to avoid the terrifying work of actually becoming who you're capable of being, I want you to know something. This recognition isn't failure. It's awakening. Jung believed that seeing the trap is the first step toward freedom. Share in the comments if you're ready to shift from waiting to becoming. Sometimes stating your readiness for transformation is what allows the transformation to finally begin. Carl Jung discovered something about what happens after the breaking open that will give you hope when you're convinced you'll never recover from this devastation. He found that empaths who fully experience the dissolution of impossible twin flame love undergo what he called sacred reconstruction, where the self that emerges from the shattering is fundamentally different from the self that entered it. You don't heal back to who you were before. You become someone you've never been. The old version of you, the one who entered this connection, she needed to die. Not because she was wrong or broken, but because she was incomplete. She knew how to love others, but not herself. She could hold space for everyone except her own heart. She could see everyone's worth except her own. That version of you was structured around a fundamental misunderstanding about where your value comes from. You believed your worth was proven through how much you could give, how much you could understand, how much you could accommodate. The twin flame connection had to destroy this belief system entirely because it was killing you slowly while you called it love. The reconstruction happens gradually, often imperceptibly at first. You start noticing moments where you choose differently. Someone shows you through their actions who they really are, and instead of making excuses, you believe them. You feel yourself starting to pour empathic energy into someone who isn't reciprocating, and you consciously pull it back toward yourself. You encounter someone whose words and behaviors don't align, and instead of trying to bridge that gap with understanding, you simply walk away. These moments feel small, but Jung knew they were evidence of the most profound transformation possible. You're developing what he called the integrated inner beloved, an internal relationship with yourself so nourishing, so present, so unconditionally accepting that external relationships shift from necessity to enhancement. You stop looking for someone to complete you because you're learning to be whole within yourself. You stop seeking someone to see you because you're witnessing your own depth. You stop needing someone to choose you because you're finally choosing yourself with the same fierce devotion you once reserved for others. This doesn't mean you stop desiring partnership. It means you desire it from fullness rather than emptiness, from sovereignty rather than need, from choice rather than desperation. The reconstructed empath becomes what Jung called a conscious lover. You maintain your capacity to feel deeply, to recognize souls, to offer profound presence, but now you do it with discernment. You no longer give your gifts to people who can't value them. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy or potential for reality. You no longer abandon yourself to maintain connection with people who aren't fully present. Jung observed that empaths who complete this reconstruction attract an entirely different quality of people into their lives. The emotionally unavailable stop feeling magnetic because you've healed the wound that made their unavailability feel like home. The people who take without giving back lose their appeal because you're no longer trying to earn love through depletion. And the people who can actually meet you, who possess the capacity to reciprocate your depth, who've done their own work, suddenly become visible in ways they never were before. But here's what Jung found most beautiful about this process. The reconstructed empath carries what he termed tempered radiance. You're still deeply feeling. You're still capable of profound recognition. You're still someone who can see souls and hold space for complexity. But now you're boundaried. Now you're discerning. Now you love yourself as fiercely as you love others. Your light still shines, but it's no longer unprotected. You've learned to offer your gifts wisely, to people who can receive them in contexts where reciprocity exists. Think about who you were before you met your twin flame. Now consider who you're becoming through this breaking open. What capacities have emerged that weren't there before? What truths are you finally speaking? What aspects of yourself are you giving permission to exist? Jung would tell you these emergent qualities weren't created by the pain. They were always within you, waiting for the right conditions to surface. The twin flame's reflection awakened them. The separation forced you to develop them independently. The breaking open created space for them to finally take root. You're not the same person who fell into this connection. You can't be. That version of you was built on foundations that couldn't support who you're becoming. The twin flame came into your life like an earthquake, and earthquakes don't repair what already existed. They destroy old structures so something stronger can be built. You're being rebuilt from the ground up with materials you didn't know you possessed, with strength you didn't know you could develop, with sovereignty you didn't know was possible for someone who feels as deeply as you do. Carl Jung spent his later years reflecting on what he called the evolutionary function of impossible love, and what he concluded will transform how you see your entire experience. He discovered that empaths who love twin flames impossibly aren't just working on personal healing. They're participating in the collective evolution of how humanity understands love itself. Every time you love without possessing, you're modeling psychological freedom. Every time you recognize someone's essence without needing to claim them, you're demonstrating mature devotion. Every time you honor connection despite impossible circumstances, you're proving that love transcends the limitations culture places on it. Jung believed that souls like yours are what he called consciousness pioneers, individuals whose emotional experiences point toward humanity's potential for more authentic, transcendent ways of relating. You're not broken from loving this way. You're evolved because of it. You've been training in advanced forms of love that most people never access. You've learned to love from essence rather than need, from recognition rather than transaction, from spiritual understanding rather than egoic desire. Think about how this connection changed your relationship with love itself. You probably stopped believing that love requires reciprocation to be real. You discovered that profound connection can exist even without conventional relationship. You learned that recognizing someone's beauty doesn't diminish when they can't return your feelings. These aren't consolation prizes for not getting what you wanted. These are advanced spiritual teachings that prepare you for forms of partnership most people can't even imagine. Jung found that empaths who integrate twin flame experiences often become what he termed wounded healers in their communities. Your friends seek you out when they're struggling because you can hold paradox. You understand that love can be simultaneously fulfilling and painful, present and absent, complete and impossible. You offer perspective that comes only from having loved at depths where ordinary relationship rules don't apply. You've touched something most people spend their lives avoiding, and that touching transformed you into someone who can help others navigate their own impossible loves. But more than just helping others, Jung discovered that integrated empaths often attract partners who can finally meet them at the depths their twin flame awakened. Not because the universe rewards personal development, though there's something to that, but because developed people naturally resonate with others who've done similar inner work. Your capacity for depth, your commitment to authenticity, your refusal to settle for surface connection, these qualities create a frequency. And when you're no longer desperate, when you're whole within yourself, That frequency calls forth people operating at similar levels. The person you couldn't have wasn't meant to be your forever. They were meant to show you what forever could look like with someone who's actually capable of building it with you. They reflected qualities you needed to see, so you'd know what to look for in someone available. The depth, the recognition, the feeling of coming home, these experiences weren't unique to them. They were teaching you what's possible so you could recognize it when it appears in someone who can actually stay. Your impossible love was never the end of your story. It was initiation into the beginning of the story you're actually meant to live. The twin flame cracked you open, not to destroy you, but to reveal capacities you didn't know you possessed. To show you that you can love at soul depth and maintain your sovereignty. That you can feel everything and not be consumed by what you feel. That you can recognize profound connection while having the wisdom to know when that connection is meant to remain in the realm of catalyst rather than partnership. Jung would want you to know that the pain you endured wasn't punishment for loving unwisely. It was preparation for loving more authentically than most people learn to love in 10 lifetimes. Every tear was sacred water nurturing gifts most people never develop. Your capacity to be shattered by someone you couldn't have wasn't your weakness. It was evidence of your soul's refusal to settle for anything less than truth, even when truth brought devastation. If you've made it this far in this exploration, I want to honor something in you. You've been brave enough to look at the most painful experience of your life and ask what it came to teach you. That willingness to find meaning in suffering is what Jung called the mark of an individuated soul. You're not just surviving this impossible love. You're allowing it to forge you into someone who will never again confuse self-abandonment with devotion, intensity with intimacy, projection with recognition. I'd be deeply moved if you'd share in the comments what your twin flame taught you about yourself. Not about them, not about love in the abstract, but about who you actually are beneath all the roles you've been playing. Your story might be exactly what another empath needs to hear to keep going. To understand that their capacity to feel everything isn't their curse but their calling. That their impossible love wasn't their failure but their awakening. And if this exploration has helped you see your heartbreak through Jung's eyes, through the lens of sacred initiation rather than romantic tragedy, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe so we can continue diving into the deeper psychology of what it means to love and be human. Share this with another empath who needs to know that when their twin flame broke them open, they weren't being destroyed. They were being freed from a version of themselves that was too small to contain who they're becoming. Thank you for trusting me with 30 minutes of your precious time. Thank you for having the courage to feel deeply in a world that often demands numbness. Thank you for being willing to transform your pain into wisdom rather than bitterness. Your empathic heart isn't broken. It's breaking open into its fullest expression. And the person you're becoming through this impossible love is someone the world desperately needs. Until we meet again in the next exploration of the human soul, may you remember this. The twin flame who couldn't stay gave you something more valuable than their presence. They gave you permission to finally become the person you were always meant to be. Someone who loves from wholeness. Someone who feels from sovereignty. Someone who knows that the deepest connection isn't about finding your other half, but about becoming so whole within yourself that when love appears in available form, you can meet it as an equal, as a collaborator, as someone who's already complete, choosing to share that completeness with another complete soul. You're not waiting anymore. You're becoming, and that becoming is the entire point of everything you've endured.